Welcome back to another edition of Up West Sports and Baseball Stuff. I'm your host, Gavin Height. That's Kyle Knowles. Well, the other way. That's Kyle Knowles, my co-host. There's a lot of negative about the Mariners offseason. A lot to be negative about. But with pitchers and catchers reporting right around the corner, we're just going to go ahead and say, you know what? Hell yeah. We got some cool stuff to talk about today. Let's keep it positive. We want to try and get pumped for this next coming upcoming year. We got Jorge Polanco, his contract with incentives, what that breaks down, what it looks like, potential in-house options for utility, and how the roster is going to shape up around the infield and boosting the other side of it as well. And then we're going to sift through some top prospects and see who can emerge in 2025. Kyle, we got some baseball stuff to talk today. Let them know.
Baseball stuff! Baseball stuff!
Alrighty, so the latest big move for the Seattle Mariners, you're bringing back Jorge Polanco. While you look at his career, over the course of, I believe it's about 10-year career, been a productive player. Last year, I think he admitted it, and it's been well regarded. He had a knee problem, and I think it just really slowed down his production mightily, and so. I think he went into the offseason. He got surgery. It sounds like he's fully healthy. And so this deal is kind of we'll see if you are fully healthy. We're looking at, it's a $7 million deal in the first year. And then the $3.5 million in incentives, would assume those are probably plate appearance based. There might be some more in there. There wasn't a lot of detail on what that $3.5 million was consistent of. But if we look into the next year, there's a little bit of a kind of caveats, right? So if he is under 450 at bats, there is a mutual option as long as he passes a physical of 750K. But if he's 450 to 550 in plate appearances, that mutual option actually turns into a player option of $6 million salary. But if he goes up to 550, that then jumps up $2 million to a player option of $8 million. So, and I'm not sure if those incentives carry over. So, that deal potentially is sitting at, it goes from 7 million with a potential of 10.5 to 6 with a potential of 9 or 8 with a potential 11.5. I'm not sure how that plays out, but to me, it's a good deal by the Mariners, especially in their very kind of cost-friendly, initiatives that they've been doing. But for Polanco, it kind of is a prove it, but what you're getting in the event, that you do these marks, and it's not this kind of, well, what happens next year? You kind of have an idea of what happens next year based on how you perform. And if you look at him, he's, third base is not exactly his position, but looking at it from a bat perspective, it's going to, I think it allow him to take some stress off his knees. And, the fact that playing third, he's not having to range as far could, result in, again, fresher legs for his at-bats. And if he can get back to the player he has been prior to the Mariners, it's a great move. But it's that if he gets back to what he was prior to the Mariners, that's kind of where we're to sit and wait.
That is the missing piece, right? Like, and all things that we've heard to this point lead to nothing but positive on that end. Apparently it was Ken Rosenthal, I believe, on one of the podcasts. I'm blanking on it at the moment, but Ken Rosenthal even put out there that his knee has been bothering him for quite some time over the past couple of years, even, and that this surgery has really put him in a great spot. I'm very excited to see what he's going to do. I think the contract makes sense on both sides. It's nice to bring back a familiar face. And I had this conversation with a couple buddies a couple weeks ago. Bringing back guys for the second year there's really, you can only go up, which is why I'm staying positive about Mitch Garver. I was positive about him last year, and I was positive about bringing back Jorge Polanco. I think guys get a second year in T-Mobile. Well, I'm gonna call it Safeco. It's always Safeco to me, but guys get a second year. I think the floor, you know what the floor is, you know what the mistakes were, you know what you have to prepare. It's an extra step of preparation, but you know what you have to prepare for a little bit more. And I think that second year gives you that boost. So, Garver batting, 160 or wherever he ended up at the end of the year wasn't very good. And then, Polanco coming back off of a surgery and also seeing a second year in that park. I think all signs point to positive in this in this upcoming year. I think what you're going to see out of him is hopefully those 450, 550 plus at bats. Him moving to third is an odd one. I guess there is limited limited movement comparative to second base, but his glove, it wasn't always regarded as very high. But I'll be interested to see, working with Perry and just getting some reps in at third. How does he make that jump this year, and what does it look like on that end? They must have seen something, or Perry Hill must have said something saying, "Hey, I could probably work with this guy." Not sure which end it came from. If it came from Perry Hill saying, "Hey, no worries, guys, I got this. Just give him to me. I'll take him over to third. We'll make this happen." And this guy doesn't have to worry about moving too much. Just getting the hot balls off of. Well, that's the last time I'm going to say hot balls, but that's for sure. But playing the hot corner and getting some shots getting thrown at your way. The other part is dealing with bunts. That first bunt that he deals, that's going to be a true indicator, because if it's early in the season, when people aren't really bunting nowadays, if it's early in the season and it exposes him, it's probably going to happen more often. And is that going to be an Achilles heel for us? Not saying you can't win ball games because of it, but it does bring a broader question of what does that look like if he can't field bunts very well. But overall, a lot to be excited about, and a lot to just kind of push forward and expect, good things. And I'm hoping, if anything, I'm hoping the home run total goes up. If he can give us 550 at bats and 22 to 25 bombs, that's awesome. That's what you're expecting from him and his bat before he came in, knowing that he's playing in T-Mobile. I'd be happy with 18 to 20. But playing third base now, all right, it would be nice if we can get into that 20 to 25 range, 22 kind of being in that. My guesstimate is where he'll kind of end up and everything. But yeah, Jorge Polanco, lot to like, and his contract I think works out for both parties. It gives him a chance to just say, okay, I'm getting a little bit of money here. It's not as much as he would have made had he had not gotten let go, but with the incentives, kind of a prove-it contract. It's still good money, and he's playing in familiar territory. So both sides, I think, win on this deal for sure. Kyle, what are your thoughts on this contract and where it lies with both parties?
Again, like mentioned earlier, I think it's a good deal for both sides. It's kind of that prove it, but it's also the prove it, but you kind of know where you land, right? And so from his perspective, it's a little bit of security, especially coming off that knee. And also a down year for the Mariners. Obviously, it's a very low value deal. It can be slightly higher, but the other piece about it too is, let's say he is doing well, and let's say we've got someone rumbling in the minor leagues that's doing really well. That's a tradable contract too. Now, I don't believe he had a no trade clause. I don't think we would give one with that low of a. With a number. I could be wrong, but as long as there's no trade, as long as there is a no trade clause not present in that deal, it's a very easy contract to trade and could be a very good asset, if we're trying to, move some pieces, bring some youth up. To me, I like that where, you look like a deal like with Garver, you're not trading a $12.5 million DH. I just don't see that being plausible. So that one, we're kind of, he's here with us, and, I hope that he can get back to some of the numbers, maybe as a platoon DH against lefties. He showed some success in those scenarios, but for Polanco, I think it's, I hopefully it puts him in a situation, again, less stress on the knees, that he can go back and he can thrive at the plate and can, be a serviceable infielder.
Yeah. And honestly, with the other plethora of infielders that you kind of have either coming up or already there, guys can shift about. And that definitely segues into our next topic of talking about potential in-house options for utility, how the infield's going to shape up. If Polanco needs a day off, or if he's going to DH, just to kind of save his knees from time to time. The other part is Mitch Garver is also kind of your backup catcher. Oh, he is your backup catcher unless you're planning on bringing up, Raposo or one of those other guys. With that being said, if Solano's playing, if he's going to play DH for the day, or if he's going to just be a DH for the day, who slides in over a third? Do you think it's going to be a Bliss? Do you think it's more? Is Solano going to be moved over there?
It's really going to depend on who the utility players are. So, I'm a big, fan of Cole Young, bringing a young guy up, kind of getting him in the mix, seeing how he kind of, how he gels with the team and how he can handle, the big stage. But you also have some other people who are a little more seasoned, a little older. You got Ben Williamson. He's your traditional kind of corner infielder, third, first. Would he be a guy that would come up and play that role? Or do you try to kind of work within the aggregate of what you have? If Polanco's taking a day off, is he DHing? Is Solano shifting over to third? Or do you have, I don't think you're moving Dylan Moore to third base unless it's really necessary. I think you're trying to give him the best opportunity to succeed and play a single position to see if he is an everyday second baseman. But in the event that you're trying to balance, okay, we're gonna shift some guys or give some guys day off. If you had a tandem of, let's just say, a Ryan Bliss and Cole Young's going to give you that kind of that infield, kind of set where Ryan Bliss can also give you that outfield. And so I would think of it as we had like a few years back. I think it was a Sam Haggerty and Dylan Moore, where yes, Dylan Moore could play the outfield, but Haggerty, I think, was a better outfielder. So Dylan Moore was kind of your fill-in for the infield, and Haggerty was your fill-in for the outfield. And also both, Haggerty much more the speed guy, which in today would be the Bliss. Cole Young's no slouch on the bases either, but if you're looking for a guy to go, get you in on, if you want a guy on first, if you guys on first, you want to get a third, you're putting Bliss in. And so I think my vote would probably be, again, to start breaking camp. I would like to see a Bliss for sure, and then potentially a Cole Young or Williamson.
Yeah, you brought up Sam Haggerty. Congrats to him on making that move to another AL West rival, the Texas Rangers. He makes the move over there. Best of luck to him. Also, fun fact, I don't know if you knew this. Of course, it's going to zoom in on me. We love this about my podcast and our podcast. I always say my podcast. It's our podcast. Can you get off my face? Can you not? Just all the way back. I'm definitely not cutting this part out. Okay, come on. Just, can you not do this? Oh, I love this thing. All the way back.
Today, Junior?
All the way back. Okay. All the way back. I wish it was voice activated.
I think you should say please.
Please? Can you? Other way. Okay, some of this is getting cut out. Other way. All the way back. God, I could tuck on my dog. Come on. Come on.
Give it a cookie.
Dude. Okay. We got the tracking off.
You'll definitely cut this out. I don't think you can see your other finger. It can't see your finger behind the mic. There you
There we go. Holy smokes. And we're back. Where did we leave off? Oh, fun fact. Wanted to throw a fun fact out of the way. Or not a fun fact out of the way. I want to throw a fun fact over to you. That video Zoom got the best of me right there. So now I lost my train of thought. I'm definitely not cutting all of it out. It's definitely some of it's gonna stay. But Sam Haggerty. We were talking about Sam Haggerty, and where did he go to college? Do you happen to know?
Was it UW?
No, it was not. And it's a smaller school. I happened to go to school in the same state, so I knew of him back in the day. And one of our other co-hosts, Jace Hinton, actually grew up in the same town, and they know each other very well. But yeah, I actually went to University of New Mexico, and I went to New Mexico Highlands, small D2 in the middle of nowhere. If you've heard of Las Vegas, New Mexico, we're the wrong Vegas. Vegas no slots. So yeah. University of New Mexico, fun fact for you. But yeah, as we kind of talked about, prior to the show, just kind of getting ready for this show and talking about Cole Young, there's a lot to like with Cole Young. The really big thing is how is he going to perform this spring training? I think that's going to be the ultimate indicator. And at 21 years old, is he good enough to make the jump from D2 from AA to the bigs? I'm in the camp of trying this stuff out, but also I do want to see a little something in spring training before kind of giving him the rubs on that one, because even though you don't have money, you do have other in-house options without potentially ruining a guy's confidence. And we've seen that happen in the past, especially with Mariners draft picks. Also, by the way, Jerry Dipoto, in case people haven't paid too much attention to his past drafts, he hasn't had too many successful hitters that he's drafted. He had one that we were all high on. I'm still a big fan and would hope that they would bring him back in Kyle Lewis. That was his very first draft pick. That was 2016. And obviously he was starbound. And then the injury really kind of took a toll on him and everything. But you look at the high school players he's drafted, and you look at the hitters that he's drafted, you haven't seen a ton of success. So I'm interested to see how they finally pan out at the top. I'm really, obviously, as a Mariners fan, I'm really hoping that Cole Young really breaks out. Obviously, Cole Emerson as well. But the other options for utility are going to be potentially Ryan Bliss, who has a ton of athleticism, being able to play. He's all SEC shortstop, playing for Auburn back in the day. He can give you shortstop if you probably ask him. Then he can give you third base, he can give you outfield. The guy's going to steal a ton of bags. Yeah, Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore are definitely those other guys that can kind of help fill in the role. I really like the utility spectrum of the Mariners is definitely there. The young talent that is coming up and what that does look like for the Mariners in 2025 and moving forward. That kind of bleeds us into our other topic of kind of sifting through these top prospects. As we mentioned, or as I've just mentioned, the hitters that Jerry has drafted over the years, we haven't seen a ton of success. So we wanted to talk through some of these prospects. We got Troy Taylor, who's now dealing with an injury. Who's potentially going to backfill him? One guy that we brought up is Reed Van Scoter. Jerry's spoken very highly about Reed Van Scoter in the past, and he looks solid. He's pull up the stats right now, but from AA last year, just over a 4 ERA. He had 100 plus innings. He gave you 22 starts. 85 strikeouts, not a big strikeout guy, but 29 walks. So he does have some quality stuff to work with, and I think he might even be better out of the pen. He does have kind of the lower three quarters arm slot from the left side, and it'd be nice to see him go up. And here's the I told Kyle I had a surprise for him that I wanted to kind of drop on him. He is not on the invites for spring training. He's not on the non-roster invites. He's not on the 40-man. So with that being said, does that mean that he's injured? Because that's actually something that I don't know. It could just mean that he's injured. It could mean that they don't have any plans for him. At 26 years old, this is a guy that you have to start taking a chance on this guy. He's going to get too old. He's going to Jake Shiner it. You waited way too long with Jake Shiner. You never gave him an opportunity, and then he bounced out, and he's now playing overseas. And so this is a guy that you probably should be taking a look at, and this is the year that you need to capitalize on it. There's a couple other guys. I know Kyle, you mentioned a couple guys that we should take a look at for this part.
Yeah, and you kind of before that, I think you touched on the age, and you got guys at 26 years old in Double-A, unless they're maybe someone who converted from an outfielder to a pitcher, or from pitching to a position player. Someone at that age, it's a make or break, and if you're just holding them there in Double-A, you're really not doing yourself any favors. That's potentially holding a roster spot for someone in high A to move up. And, at that, so really those are when you start seeing people at 26 years old, granted, if, especially if they came in, maybe as a 19-year-old, maybe out of high school, like that's a long time in an organization to sit at Double-A as your top level. So it's one of those, let's see what we have. Otherwise, we need to, cut it loose and move on. Not just for the team, but let the kid go and let him see if he finds a better fit somewhere else. But just to have these, start seeing these very, 24, 25, you can only have so many people on a roster, but at the same time, you only have so many other. But that's all the way down from rookie ball to the big leagues. And, we're in the business. I mean, in the minor leagues, it's the business of developing, right? Developing them to see if they can get into the show. And if you've got someone there you're just holding on to, and you're just letting them kind of essentially age out, then what you're not really doing yourself any favors. I mean, this really, you talked about Dipoto and not having successful hitters. To me, there's kind of I haven't seen a lot of hitters get called up. So are they failing down below? I mean, again, out of our top 20 prospects, 6 of them are shortstops. So you are, based on this, unless you start trading them off, you're going to have 24, 25, 26-year-olds. So granted, they might make AAA at that point, but you're just going to be stockpiling these guys, and you're not doing anything with them. You're not, I mean, again, we're not doing anything to help the team out in that regard. So it kind of gets frustrating when you see that, and sometimes, I don't know. I mean, you look at Seager, right? Seager was batting 600 in Double-A, skips AAA, goes to the majors. I would say had a pretty successful career in Seattle. Now on the flip side, you do a guy like Jared Kelenic, you bring him right up. He struggles early. You put him down to AAA to work on something. You bring him back up. He becomes now your fringe quad A player. And so I get the hesitation, but the hesitation to move these guys up and see what you have, to me, is just, it's just a little egregious. So yeah, we see, like right now we've got 2 pitchers. You talk about Reed, Van Scooter, and then another one is Jimmy Joyce, both 26 years old, sitting in Double-A. What's up? Was there a Tommy John that missed a year? You got Taylor Dollard. He's sitting in AAA at 25. You got Brain Garcia, 24 in Double-A. Like, to me, that's okay. You got 100. Now you got Hunter Cranton, who's 24 in Single A. What? And then you got a couple other guys that are 23 in Double-A, Single A. At what point do we, hey, we got to move you up just to see if you can handle it, because
Well,
we need to move you up so we can get the next people through, and hopefully, and pitching's different, right? Because with pitching, you look at Felix, right? The guy had command of his pitches. He had multiple pitches he could throw for strikes. You put him in at 19. And I get that, we're talking about a potential Hall of Famer there. So that's sometimes maybe not the best example, but you look at a lot of these pitchers that I think for me, pitchers, you've got mileage. Like there's only so much miles you can put on an arm. So if they can do it at 19, get them up there. If they can do it at 22, get them up there. Now you get them at 26. Now you're dealing with, we need to get them up there, but you just put in a lot of miles on that arm that really you probably could have figured out much earlier what you had.
Yeah, and I think there's an area of growth for the younger guys. Is they also need to be mature enough to pitch at that level, at least to a certain degree. Some guys you can just throw in there and they'll probably figure it out along the way. Some guys will just get mentally defeated, and you need the coaching staff, I think, does a pretty good job of kind of sifting those guys out, saying, hey, he's 21 years old, he's electric, but also he does need another year of development, which I'm curious on what they do with Ryan Sloan, what his progression through the minor leagues looks like, because he's a 19-year-old, and he's one of the high school pitchers that Jerry's drafted that I'm pretty big on. I was very big on Chris Livonis this past draft. He got drafted in the Comp B round, still said no, and ended up at Wake Forest. So I'm excited to see him as a freshman at Wake Forest, and it makes me a little happier that the Mariners still have a chance at getting him here in a couple of years. But Ryan Sloan was right behind him for me this last draft. So I'm curious to see on what that progression looks like. But I did want to touch on the Taylor Dollard situation. So Taylor Dollard, actually, he hasn't thrown since 2023. He only had 3 starts that year. I believe he had shoulder surgery, and I believe it was labrum. And then he re-aggravated it this past year. And so I think the only reason that he hasn't gotten that shot is because he hasn't been fully healthy yet. And this is the year he is a dark horse to just kind of put in the back pocket of, if he comes back and he's anything like what he was. He put up incredible numbers before he got injured. Honestly, before 2023, I think he was, just looking at his 2023 numbers for the 3 games that he did play, there was a chance that he was kind of injured going into those 3 games. But Taylor Dollard really does have a chance to, come back, break out, and be that kind of either 6th starter, long reliever, or maybe he finds a new role coming out of the pen in some capacity. I wanted to get also into the non-roster invites and just kind of, walk through them and see, who really does have a chance at kind of breaking this roster, who does have that depth piece. If somebody gets injured, if they have a good camp, could they break? So Peyton Alford is one from this list that has, kind of that, he's done well in his minor league career. He has, put up some good numbers in the past, and he is one to, just definitely take a look at for the spring training. He might turn some heads, and even if he puts up good numbers and everybody's healthy, he's one of those guys that maybe just waits in AAA and he's ready to go. But I also agree, some of these guys, at some point, you got to give them an opportunity. Even if it's just a cup of coffee, you got to give them an opportunity to at least prove you wrong. Especially with the bullpen problems that they've had over the past, just over last year, with having Gregory Santos out, with having Matt Brash out, and then relying on guys like Troy Taylor, which was awesome. He ended up doing a fine job, but that was a really good opportunity to give a cup of coffee to a Jimmy Joyce, to a Reed Van Scoter, and just kind of see what they have. Granted, you're playing with wins and losses when you get into that point, but also you're playing with wins and losses by having Ryan Stanek as your closer last year as well, and just pitching late in the game as is. But back to the list, Peyton Alford is one of the guys I'm excited to see this spring training, and then Luis F. Castillo, as we talked about in our last podcast. The other Luis Castillo, he's got a lot to like, and I think there's at least something there to make noteworthy and see what we got going on. Hunter Cranton, as Kyle just mentioned, he was just drafted last year, 24 at the draft, I believe. He might have been 23, but only played in Modesto and put up great numbers. He is a dark horse to make the roster. I don't think he actually will make the roster, but he's got the stuff. The stuff is there for him. He can definitely, if he were to be given a roster spot with the Mariners, I don't think he would. I don't think he would look bad at the MLB level. So he's a guy that you might take a chance on at some point this year. Maybe. Super dark horse to even break the roster with the boys going into opening day. Logan Evans, I think he's also on that hot list of guys that break the roster. The big thing with him, you look at his stats and you see him being rerouted from a starter to a relief pitcher. I really want to know what their plan is, because I've heard a lot of rumors from other podcasters, from other scouts, and everybody saying, oh, he could be your sixth starter. He could be that guy if somebody gets injured. It's tough to continue the development with a player if you keep going back and forth between relief, starting. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's tougher. It's a different way to prepare for the game. And so with a guy that's as good as Logan Evans, I would pick a pocket and go. Is the best way I can kind of describe that. So I'm hoping with Logan Evans that they can maybe pick a lane, stay in the lane, and just say, hey, you're going to be our setup guy. You're going to be, the next Paul Sewald for us. They got Neftali Feliz, who did they say he came out of retirement? That
2021 when he last played.
Yeah, 2021 he last played. I believe it was him that they said he came out of retirement. You know what? Hell yeah. I'm excited to see him in spring training. It was like when Garth Brooks played for the Kansas City Royals back in the day. He actually hit a shot at short. I was actually at the game. This was back in 2003, 2004, right around that era. They gave him an at bat against the Mariners, and he hit a shot at short. He almost beat it out, but the beer gut got him, and he wasn't able to beat it out. But no, some other guys. Shintaro Fujinami, obviously, everyone's talking about this guy. Can the Mariners hone in, his walk rate? He has trouble finding the strike zone. If the Mariners and especially Jerry and his crew, who have done a phenomenal job of either finding strike throwers or building strike throwers, that really closely relates to Logan Evans. Logan Evans, if you look at his stats from college, he didn't necessarily have the best, walk rate. He walked a lot of guys at Pitt, and they got.
He kept the game moving.
He can, sure, yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, they got a hold of him, and they were able to, have him dial up and find the strike zone. He had really nasty stuff that they wanted to work with. I'm really hoping that Shintaro Fujinami is another one of those guys that they're able to, kind of hone in. He's born in '94. He's only 4 years younger than you and I. So he's still young enough that you could potentially mold. Hopefully he's still in that time frame. Brandon Garcia, he's another guy, especially coming from the left side. With him and Van Scoter, that is something that the Mariners kind of lack a little bit, is just left-handed relief pitching, and honestly left-handed pitching. We don't have a left-handed starter. So left-handed pitching in general. Brandon Garcia is one of those guys, because he is left-handed and because he's done so well, that maybe they push him to the pen. Again, this is another guy I don't want to see them go back and forth. I want them to hopefully just make a decision. You are going to be a relief pitcher. Boom, here you go. This is how you're going to train. This is how you're going to, take your week by week. And then, if they decide to keep him as a pitcher, that's also not a bad idea, because they don't have any left-hand starting pitching. And they're also kind of lacking starting depth past the 5 they got. Still high on Emerson Hancock, and I think he might be better than what most people are thinking. I think most people have him as a failed prospect right now, and I don't think that's I don't think
he's in a log jam. I don't think you can call him a failed prospect. He's been hurt a couple times, which has been a bummer. Otherwise, he's been the 6th starter on a 5-man rotation, and you're not going to put that guy as a long reliever because all you're doing is just essentially wasting him. I mean, that's kind of how Brash was kind of the, hey, he's a starter, started off hot, fell off. We're going to make you a reliever. Oh, we're going to put you back in as a starter. That's a lot to put on a kid. And he is a kid. And so to your point, it's kind of at what point or what, again, you're not getting a John Smoltz. There's your unicorn, a guy that can be a starter. Okay, I'm going to go be a closer now. I'll go start a few more seasons. Now I'm going to go back. That's a different cat. And so when you get to some of these young guys, you also kind of have to look at their history. Have they been able to pitch out of the pen before? Have they been able to pitch multiple days in a row, regardless if it's 1 inning or 2 innings? I think the makeup of a relief pitcher is different than a starter. And I think that's something that has to be acknowledged. I know we sometimes want, I think you look at Brandon Morrow, right? He's a starter throwing 92. You put him in as a reliever and always popping 99. I think it's just, again, the makeup of the player really can dictate that. And I think a big way to determine that is how people recover. If they recover quickly, then you can put them in there. Maybe in AAA, you have the guy start 3 games in a row, and then for the next 2 weeks, he's a reliever, and then you kind of put him back in the rotation, something, because you don't have to, as long as he's not starting for months on end, you could take him out of the rotation for 1 or 2 rotations to make the guy to be in a relief spot and then put him back in. He's not going to lose his edge or lose his conditioning by that. And so, but ultimately, I just think it's looking at the makeup of a player, and I get we want to rush people up and down, but if they don't have the ability to recover quickly, they're not a reliever. They're just, all you're going to do is hurt the guy, and ultimately it's going to hurt your team.
Yeah, it is very difficult to make that transition from starter to reliever. It's just one of those things where I hope they kind of figure it out and pick a lane and stay in it. Beyond that, there's another success story that comes along with that, and that's Tim Lincecum. Tim Lincecum, I believe it was the last year, 2010, 12, 14. I think it was 2014, where they finally, he wasn't doing very well as a starter. They moved him to the pen. They went to the postseason, and he was lights out. When the lights were on, he was lights out. There can be success, but man, it is a mentality that you have to find, and it's a routine that you have to get out of and then get back into, and it is very difficult. And this is coming from my own personal experience as well. When I went to Western Oregon out of high school, I was a starter, and through the fall I was supposed to start, and we had 3 draft picks in front of me that it was very difficult to find a start for my freshman year. So they moved me to the pen. It was wild. I ended up getting a save. It was an electric feeling. I didn't like it. I was a starter, and that's what I loved. And partially on me for not trying to adapt to that new role, but also, it just wasn't for me. I'd like to see what Emerson Hancock can do. Especially, he's really jumped into the mold that I think Jerry wants. He is now throwing more strikes. Like, you see his AAA numbers. He's starting to throw more strikes, less walks. He doesn't strike guys out, which is what he was doing at Georgia, and that was the profile that he fit. He was kind of that upper nines guy. Now he's a lower nines guy, and he's got a lot of movement on his fastball, and he's getting ground balls. And I think that's the profile that Jerry wanted him to fit into, and now he's there. I'm curious on seeing how that pans out. It didn't pan out for the first handful of starts, and I think those were his first starts in the MLB. And then I remember him getting tossed back down in AAA, having a great AAA season, and then coming back up, I think, for 1 or 2 starts. And I know one of those starts, he went 5 or 6 innings, gave up a run, maybe 2, couple hits, and had a good outing. So there's a lot to like with Emerson Hancock in all that as well. Just kind of getting through more of this list, you get Jesse Hahn, who's, he was a big name, 10 plus years ago. Austin Kitchen, the Coastal Carolina guy. Curious to see on what their thoughts are, with Austin Kitchen, what their plans are really with Austin Kitchen. Another guy that's coming up on his mid to late 20s, and what's their plan for him? Is he going to be a Mariner? Is he going to contribute to the boys? Is he going to be moved? And you got Sarin Lau, Casey Lawrence, Adonis Medina, Drew Pomeranz, and Doris Valdez. Definitely all guys that are just going to be fighting for opportunities. Drew Pomeranz, another guy 10 plus years ago, he was a name. Kind of getting past the pitchers. We've been talking a good deal on the pitchers. I wanted to get into the catcher situation. So the catchers that were invited: Josh Caron, Connor Charping, Harry Ford, Jacob Nottingham, and Nick Ricoso, also with Blake Hunt back in the fold. All fighting the top 2, Mitch Garver and Cal Raleigh. We all know, kind of who leads that front on that end. Excited for Blake Hunt to be back in Seattle. He had good numbers before trading him. I was not necessarily a fan of the trade just because their catching depth wasn't good at the time. They had Harry Ford that was still coming up. If something happened to one of your catchers, which at the time was supposed to be Sebi Zavala, but they ended up putting Mitch Garver, back in the fold and having him as the backup catcher for the good part of the year. What happens if you need Cal Raleigh a couple extra games, and then he needs a couple extra games off because you put so much pressure on him to catch those games? Blake Hunt being moved for Bauman was not wasn't necessarily what I would have done. I know the idea was correct in finding a relief pitcher because guys had just gone down. Obviously, Brash and Santos going down, so you needed help, and Stanek was not helping at that point in time. But Bauman just wasn't, and unfortunately, it just wasn't it. But Nick Raposo, he could be making a push for that. Jacob Nottingham has former MLB experience, and so he could be making a push. Harry Ford, if I was a bet man, I'd say he's still probably a year away. Maybe gets a September call-up, but unless, barring just an amazing spring training, I don't know if he moves the needle enough to kind of get that push.
And he's a tough one too, right? Because he's a 21-year-old catcher. Do you really want to move him up just to sit on the pine for one every 6 days? He gets to go, don the gear. I'm not sure what other. I think they've talked about potentially having him work out at first and maybe right field, but to me, that's a lot of development. You might as well just keep the guy down in AAA for, unless you're going to say, hey, we're just going to cut Garver and we're going to bring Henry Ford up as our kind of DH backup catcher. I just feel like that role is kind of set, supplanted. It's kind of in stone with Garver, unless you want to take him out of it.
Yeah. And it is kind of Garver's to lose. And I understand it's $12 million for a backup catcher right now, but I like that. And also familiarity. He already has at least a year of familiarity with the pitching staff, which is always a bonus. And I think at some point, if you want to start winning games, you might have to put Cal Raleigh at DH or even first base. I don't know if he's touched first base. I would imagine at some point in his career, he's made his way over there just so he can stay in the lineup. But I'm curious on how they navigate Cal Raleigh moving forward. And does he end up, instead of giving him 135 games, he's one of your better hitters. You want to try and get him for 150 plus if he's healthy. So I'm curious on how they navigate him moving forward. Because like any catcher, right? When is that move to first? And what does it look like? Does it happen for Cal Raleigh? who's coming off a platinum glove year, it's tough to take that away. But his bat is also so significant that, if you were to give him a full year of DH, I'm curious on what his stats would actually be when he doesn't have to worry about his knees every game or every 2 out of 3 games. But
on the
yeah,
on the flip side, though, as a guy that's used to like not having to sit there and do only hitting, it might make it worse. Having that outlet as a catcher for him, that might be an outlet, being able to analyze the game and as a hitter, he's talked about it. My job is to catch. Hitting is just the other thing I do. For him, he might be a better hitter when he can have it be just muscle memory. I'm not thinking about it. I just go up there and do what I've practiced for majority of my life. Now you haven't fixated on it, but the management, right? We talk about the management of the catcher. I think again it comes back to the makeup of the player. I mean, you look at some of these guys like a Jorge Posada. He played. I mean, minus the one time he played second base for an inning or two, he caught his entire career. For the most part, Posey was, I think, the last 2 years of his career. Now, I would say Cal Raleigh being kind of a huskier individual, I think he's probably going to have to shift at some point, or you're going to have to find yourself a really good backup catcher so he can catch, 125 games and then he can DH the remainder, or you give him, maybe it's 125 at catcher, you give him 25 at DH and another 12 at first base. I mean, just to manage it. But I think it's dependent on, his conditioning and how he is, makeup wise. Is he a guy that, nope, this guy could go catch for another 30 years. You wouldn't know the difference. But I get the true understanding of why, that you want to manage it now so it's not a problem later. Could that have been a Felix, for Felix, for example, could you have moved him to the pen and got another 5 years out of him? I mean, him as a closer with that arsenal would have been absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
we're as long as I'm admitting all my mistakes today, and just visibly showing my mistakes, my mic, even though it was green and it was on, it wasn't actually connected to this. So glad to be back with a mic that I paid for, and half the show is going to be probably not the best audio quality. So apologies out there, but we are back with the Shure mic. Wrapping up with Cal Raleigh, you're right. Is it an outlet for him? There's pros and cons to moving him to other positions moving forward. Maybe not this year, but there's pros and cons to it. And one of the cons could be that maybe it is a true outlet for him. Maybe it is, he turns everything off when he goes up to the plate because, he spends so much time focusing on which hitters are coming up to the plate, which pitchers are coming in out of the pen. I'm curious to know that from his perspective, and giving him a full year at DH this young in his career, does it mentally hurt him because he's so used to catching and that's part of his game? But continuing on, moving through this list, with the infielders that are coming in, just the non-roster invitees, you got Michael Arroyo, who's still probably another year or two away. Again, I know I talked about this last episode. Michael Arroyo has been highly touted as he's the team funny guy. He's the guy that everybody loves gravitating to. So I'm a big advocate for him. I know there's been a lot of trade speculation. I'm hoping you got to give up something to get something. I'm hoping he's one of those pieces that he just doesn't get snaked out of a trade and makes his way back in. But again, I don't see any way that he makes the roster this year. Very excited to see what he does moving forward. Nick Dunn, I don't know too much about. Colt Emerson, obviously number one prospect in our organization. Kyle's got a wild trade that we're actually going to be talking about on Sunday. So make sure to tune in on that and just kind of put the 2 and 2 together of who I just talked about, and make sure you tune in on Sunday. Brock Rodden was another one that could be a dark horse to make a push for at least playing time this year, and just seeing, what that looks like if Ryan Bliss ends up not being what we kind of hope for him to be if Dylan Moore is injured in that scenario, or he's not, playing up to par. Between Brock Rodden and Samad Taylor, those are two guys that could get the call again. The other one, obviously, Cole Young, you mentioned him before. The one that for me, and I don't know how many games he's played at second base. I think it's a handful. I think he's played more games at third, but he has played some at second. Ben Williamson is one of those guys that could make that jump this year. And he doesn't necessarily, like 6'1", 210, doesn't necessarily profile as a second baseman, but you look at his stats as a hitter and you're like, that's a second baseman for sure. Higher batting average, a pretty good OBP, doesn't strike out a ton, and doesn't hit a whole lot of bombs. Like that's a solid second baseman. So he's another one of my dark horses to not just break the roster, but actually get some good playing time and help the Mariners win some games potentially this year. And if not this year, next year. Ben Williamson is one of those guys I hope also that they don't trade, but if they do, I want to know what that return is. I'm just curious. And then going into your outfield, I don't think you have anybody that moves the needle there. You got Las Montez, who's probably 2 years away, maybe a year, depending on how he blows up. He's a DH.
I think he's a DH.
Probably, I think he plays the outfield just to see what you got, but I think he makes the move. Maybe even with his size, they may even try and move him over to first. Yordan Alvarez isn't the best outfielder.
That's who he is. I mean, that's probably the comp.
Yeah,
but I'd say he's a less athletic Yordan Alvarez, and that's scary knowing that Yordan Alvarez doesn't really run.
There is that potential for sure. I'd like to see what he can at least do out there at the major league level and give him some outfield spots. But if it's anything like Mitch Haniger last year, yep, okay. I think you're just focused on hitting and give us 40 plus bombs a year and be the next Yordan Alvarez. We'll be okay with that. But also that doesn't happen for the Mariners. Nobody turns into that in Seattle, unfortunately. And then Spencer Packard, who is at this point, unfortunately, kind of a depth piece. Pending Dominic Canzone just a complete drop off. Packard might get some opportunities, but I think they're going to give Dominic Canzone the run first, and it's kind of his fourth or fifth outfield spot to lose. I guess sixth if you count Luke Raley, because you'll probably put Luke Raley over Canzone. But
he's also your first baseman now.
Well, he's your first baseman, but if you want to get Solano into the lineup and Bliss into the lineup, just shake things up because other guys aren't hitting. Does he make that move to the outfield? Solano plays first, and it really just kind of depends on the day. Sometimes you just need to shake things up and just try a new lineup. And then Rylan Thomas, who was actually part of the Stanek trade, he was the comeback from the New York Mets. So yeah, as we get through the non-roster invitees, there's really not a ton. When you look at the full roster, the non-roster invitees, you're not going to sit here and say, I'll put a lot of money on the Seattle Mariners to win the World Series. But they do have ways, they do have depth and ways to win if everybody plays par to above par. And we kind of saw this last year as well. If the hitters were just par last year, they probably would have won close to 90 games, if not 90 games or more.
Well, look at the 2001 Mariners. I mean, for everything they did, I don't think you can look at that team on paper and go before that year and go, oh yeah, World Series bound. And I know we didn't make it to the World Series, but 116 game winners, you're not seeing that with that roster. But what that roster had was a bunch of players that fit a particular role, and it was a role they thrived in. And on top of that, they all had above average, potentially all career years. So again, we're not going to have 9 guys have career years, but if you can have guys that have if you have above average years and maybe a couple career years sprinkled in, this roster has that opportunity, that has that, ability. The hard part is just the floor is so low compared to teams like, a Dodgers, a Yankees, big spending market teams, where their floor is just, we're looking at this, right? Their floor and our floor. And so we're going to have not just average, but slightly more to compete at that level where those teams are consistently playing in the playoffs, which is a bummer, but doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yeah. That's going to do it for our show. Actually, we covered a lot today, Kyle. Episode 5, it's now officially in the books. But before we go though, I did want to give a shout out to this hat that I'm wearing right now. A lot of people might not know what this is. This is actually Green River Community College. Rest in peace to the program. Gone, but not forgotten. Revive the Riv. And of course, there's my camera taking off again. We love AI tracking. That's going to do it for us. Just remember, life's too short. Gas up your boys.